Welcome to Season 2 of Chosen for What? I'm Tommy Schnurmacher, and along with the Foundation for Genocide Education, I'm thrilled to welcome you back for another season of the podcast. This season, we're doing things a little differently. We're going to hear from a lot of different people, and that was a conscious decision on our part to be able to include a wider variety of voices. Each episode is going to have its own theme, and we're going to do our best to cover that theme from every possible angle. And that starts with the discussion about anti-Semitism. No denying that anti-Semitism has been on the rise globally, especially since October 7th. What sort of impact does that have on the second, third, and fourth generation survivors of the Holocaust and Jews as a people? And that conversation starts with Rabbi Lisa Grushcow, a spiritual leader and writer with whom I had the pleasure of speaking with for this podcast. And I asked her what she thought about the rise in anti-Semitism.
I think that it's a question that's really coming into conversation these days, whether it was Bret Stephens' widely shared talk at the 92nd Street Y a couple weeks ago, or Sarah Hurwitz in her new book, As a Jew. She's going to be here at Temple talking about it in April. You know, there's this conversation coming up of people saying, hey, we've put all of this time and money and energy into fighting anti-Semitism, and ultimately, anti-Semitism isn't a Jewish problem, right? It's a problem that affects us more than anyone else. But for the most part, we're not the anti-Semites, right? And so the question is, what is our capacity to make change, and how much energy do we put into that? And the one, it's something I'm still very much thinking about, but the caution I would have is this, that I don't think this is all or nothing. And I don't think that there's only one way to combat anti-Semitism, right? And so a lot of the work that's been done in terms of just human connection, relationship building, dialogue, conversation, that's not explicitly to lessen anti-Semitism. But what it does is it helps us all humanize each other and know each other, right? So for all kinds of reasons, I'd be hesitant to turn my back on that work. But do I think that if we somehow come up with the right curriculum or the right mandate for education, that anti-Semitism is going to disappear from the world? Halavai, I wish, but I don't think that that's the reality. And I think that, and I'll add this one thing, I think parts of the organized Jewish community have kind of, in a way, capitalized, right, on fear of anti-Semitism because it scares us, and rightly so. And so then we donate and we give to wherever we think can help stop this. But the other side of it, again, which people like Stephens and Hurwitz have been saying, but frankly that rabbis have been saying for years, is that it can't be, the reason to be Jewish can't be to thwart people who hate you, right? That's, to not give Hitler a posthumous victory, all of those phrases. Jewish identity has to come from more than that, it seems to me. And we've known this ever since our beginnings.
Another person that we spoke with for this podcast was Mollie Bowman, a third-generation descendant of Holocaust survivors and the managing director of Living Links, an organization working to connect and support descendants of survivors across the United States. Her work focuses on education, community building, and responding to hate through collective action and public engagement. She and I spoke about why it's so important to talk to young people about anti-Semitism.
One of the missions in going into classrooms is to combat anti-Semitism. It's to tell the stories that there's real people behind a history that's often told in numbers, and anti-Semitism was a direct cause that led to the Holocaust. And so if we can teach students especially how to recognize what the signs of that are, really know what the definition of that is, speak up and be an ally in their own communities, then we're doing a small part in trying to combat anti-Semitism in younger generations. And of course, this weighs heavily on a lot of people in our community. On a personal note, I got involved with this work and took this job post October 7th when I felt like telling these stories, bearing witness, sharing survivors' memories, like that is incredibly important, whether both for October 7th, of course, but also watching how my grandmother's story made an impact. It really brought me back to the mission of keeping these Holocaust testimonies alive, and to work in this field. I didn't have a history of previously working in Jewish engagement and education and the Holocaust education space, but felt really personally called to that. And we are experiencing a very similar surge in interest in our speaker training and in our communities around the country as people are, stepping into this even more and feeling really connected with their Jewish identity and their identity as a descendant of survivors and what that means to activate them in this moment.
Shoshana Cenker is a third-generation descendant of Holocaust survivors, a freelance writer, and a member of the Memphis Jewish Federation's Holocaust Memorial Committee. She has spent years documenting her grandparents' story and continuing their legacy through writing, community work, and family traditions. She and I caught up and spoke about what the reality is like for her children living in this world.
What is a little bit scary, though, is that my boys just turned 15-year-olds. I have 2 twin boys. Their birthday was yesterday. And my daughter is 13. And the boys wear yarmulkes. They wear kippas. We're modern Orthodox. And we were in a place somewhere. It was either Mississippi or Arkansas on a trip recently. And one of my kids, Kiwi, he said to me, "Should I take my kippah off?" And that's scary. To immediately think, what would Bubby and Zadie be thinking if they were to hear their great-grandchild ask a question about hiding our identity is terrifying. So we make smart choices. We consult people if we're going to certain places. It's a different time, and I think that the survivors who have passed, if they were living today, I would think that their voices would be very loud saying, this is what it felt like, 70, 80 years ago. How is it happening again? So again, I don't know that scary is the right word. I'm not quite sure what the right descriptor is. It's a lot of self-awareness. And I think part of it also is that it's actually made us even more proud. We don't want to hide.
Right.
Safety comes first, but we want to scream from the hilltops. We are Jews and we are happy and we are good people. It's a very uneasy time that we're living. And my boys are looking at colleges. That's now something I never would have thought I would have had to think about. Is the campus safe for them? How much anti-Semitism is happening on that college campus? It's not great.
As we carve out space to discuss the rise in anti-Semitism, it's equally important to discuss anti-Zionist movements, too. Adam Louis Klein is an anthropologist who's been closely examining the rise of anti-Zionism and how it's being expressed in academic spaces and public spaces. Now, Adam, when we talk about anti-Zionism, there's a lot of language being used, specific words, expressions, settler colonialism, apartheid, and genocide. How are these terms being used exactly?
Yeah, so anti-Zionism really is its own completely highly formed, developed, internally consistent, at least, ideological complex, right? And for a long time, we haven't talked about anti-Zionism as its own ideological complex. We've been lost in conversations about whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic because Zionism is a part of Jewish identity, and we haven't talked about this language and these terms, right? But anti-Zionism can be reduced to sort of these 3 core libels that you already mentioned. And in my work, I've traced the history of how these libels emerged across time, across different intersecting traditions. But these libels, like you say, are colonizers. So Jews are these white European foreign colonizers in Israel. Apartheid, Jews deliberately set up an evil, racist, hierarchical state, a Jewish supremacist state to oppress Palestinians, and genocide. So Israel is an inherently genocidal state, right? It's not a specific claim, the genocide accusation against Israel, against certain individuals who had genocidal intent. It's all ultimately based on this notion that Israel is a settler colonial state. It's inherently genocidal. That's part of the way Israel was formed. It's an ongoing process. Patrick Wolf, who sort of founded settler colonial studies, at least in the West, called it a structure, not event. So he very intentionally changed the concept of genocide from a specific crime that individuals and agents intentionally do at a specific time to a sort of diffuse process where the whole society is just sort of committing genocide over decades, right? So that is really the core of anti-Zionism, and it's quite different than classical anti-Semitism.
If you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate, follow, or subscribe to Chosen for What, wherever you get your podcasts. To make a donation or to learn more about the Foundation for Genocide Education, you can visit their website at gened.org. Don't worry, the link can be found in the show notes. For the Foundation for Genocide Education, I'm Tommy Schnurmacher. Until next time.